Welcome to the Resolution Room, a space for reflection and meaningful dialogue. I'm Dr. Nashay Lowe. My work sits at the intersection of leadership, communication, and conflict transformation, helping people see challenge as a teacher, not a threat. Each episode invites you to look closer, think deeper, and lead with greater intention. Because resolution isn't the absence of difficulty, it's learning to move through it on purpose. Let's get into it. In this episode, we sit down with PhD candidate Priscilla Adebayo to explore what resilience really looks like in the face of forced displacement. So through her research and advocacy, Priscilla invites us to rethink the stories we tell about migration, not as statistics, but as deeply human experiences shaped by strength, agency, and survival. Together, we'll unpack how systems of conflict affect women differently, what it means to center dignity in humanitarian work, and why listening is a radical act of solidarity. So this episode explores how conflict transforms identity and how resilience grows in the space between loss and rebuilding. So Priscilla, if you could please introduce yourself, let everyone know a little bit about you and the work that you do.
Thank you, Nashay, for having me. It's a privilege being here today. Thank you to the listeners for listening in today. My name is Priscilla Adebayo. And like she said already, I'm a candidate in international conflict management, a PhD candidate at Kansas State University. So, yes, I've been on a journey, I'll call it. It's been a while. It's been,
You're getting through it, though.
Right. You can say that again. I've been working with refugee women, specifically in Clarkston, Georgia, for now. My research is actually looking into how can we help refugee women to, restart their lives over after the sudden experience of conflict that they had power over. How can they take back their lives? Yeah, that's what that's where I'm going to put it in simple time. How can they take back their lives, rewrite their own stories, and, be at the forefront of rewriting their own stories. Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about what drew you to that type of research?
It's been a long time coming because, I can remember, I grew up in Nigeria, and back in Nigeria, when I was in elementary school, I remember kids joining us like midway, like third grade, fourth grade, because their parents had to migrate back to the southwestern part of Nigeria because of the conflict. There's been a lot of religious tensions and conflicts in the northern part of Nigeria. So even my mom, I remember when we pray, every morning she prays, for people like that experiencing war and conflict. So most of those children come to school, and I remember I would always be their friend, and I'll be like, "Oh, tell me, so what was the conflict like? How has it been like?" Then they're gonna tell me stories. Some of them were made to watch. They saw some people being killed. A lot of chaos happening. And one thing now that I'm more aware, I notice that most of those kids usually don't do well academically in school. It's just now I'm able to connect the dots. And so from there, that was where I think I could trace my interest in victims in court now, or survivors of conflict. Okay, so what happens after you guys fled the war? Okay, so how is your life taking shape? What do you want to do now after that? Because most of them, their dreams, their aspiration has often gone with the conflict that they experienced. And they're like, okay, I'm just going to live a day at a time, whatever life throws at me, without any dream, without any hope or, vision for what is to come ahead. So that was my first experience. And then getting to the university, we'll call it, you guys will call it college here. I practically had the opportunity to work with Liberian refugees. We went to the refugee camp because they were close to my school then, my college. So we go there to help them. They even would braid our hair and all those stuff. So they would tell us stories about it. So since then, I'm like, okay, so what's up with you guys? What do you want to do after now? So that was how my interest in post-conflict investment in victims and survivors, of war in post-conflict settings and also in resettlement settings. So the one I'm doing in Clarkston now is, I can call Clarkston a resettlement setting. So
it's amazing. It's obviously been around you for a lot of your life, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess from your experiences and your conversations with different refugee women in particular, Why do you think it's important to center refugees as subjects of agency rather than victims?
That's that nomenclature is very important for them, for their psychological well-being. And I'll begin by explaining like a typical cycle of how, it all comes down for them. For example, a refugee, suddenly for example, I'm working mostly with Sudanese refugee women. And so from their stories, they just suddenly knew they had to run and they kept running and running until they got to the next town and the next town because they were killing everybody and they had to run for their lives. And then they're going to like sometimes see some trucks that's going to help them from one city to another city. And then after that, they keep working until they found themselves in Egypt. So most of them came from South Sudan and then found themselves in Egypt. They just kept going until they got to Egypt. Days, no food, nothing. And so you get to Egypt expecting like at least like a warm welcome or like, oh, you guys. And unfortunately, it's just, okay, here's the camp. You guys just go to the camp and you're just thrown like, it's just like a survival of the fittest. You have to fend for yourself, look for a job, find a way to survive. And suddenly reality just hits you and you're like, my God, I might never be going back home anymore. Like, it's like I don't have a home again. And then the status, suddenly comes upon the reality of the status suddenly comes upon them like, oh my God. So I'm truly now a refugee. I don't have a home. I don't know where I will be next week. So the sudden understanding of that sets is like the psychological trauma that sets their whole world crashing down. So up until that moment, they kept it was about survival. And then they got to a place where they know, okay, nobody's going to kill me here. But then at this point, going forward, how do I proceed with life? So that, crisis also sets in. And by the time they're done in Egypt, they went through a lot in Egypt. A lot of them were sexually assaulted. A lot of them, at that point, most of the women even had to take on like the roles of men because typically the Sudanese men were not so welcome in Egypt because they are like really tall and big. And so the Egyptian people are scared of them and they're, no, I can't give you a job. You're going to beat me up. At that point, the women, the young girls had to become the breadwinners of their families. So they have to go pick up just minimum wage jobs as nannies, caregivers. Those were the kind of jobs available for them. And they would still pay them like lesser than they would have paid the Egyptian people. And then at that point, they just have to survive with whatever they're paid. And then typically in that situation, their bosses or their boss's husband, throwing some sexual advances at them. And some young ladies even, during the interviews shared that they might be walking on the road and then someone just spanks them and there's nothing you can do about it. And, a lot of name calling, shaming, blaming, like, oh, they call them black monkeys in their language. They call them, what was it? Country spoiler in their language. They told me like all of those language, although they were telling me they were laughing at it now because they are now in the US, so I'm like, my God. So, they've gotten to that point where even those things, they just laugh at them.
You have to learn to laugh through the pain.
Exactly. Like to survive and, to just get by. And so them now finding themselves fully, after the experience in Egypt and everything, even when they try to like report to policemen, like, oh, this person is harassing me, or this person beat me up, the police are like, so do you expect us to arrest an Egyptian for you? We're not going to do that. So, no justice, nothing. So it leaves you broken. Those such experiences, like nobody wants you, you don't have a home, you've lost family members, you've lost friends, your life suddenly came to an end in one day. And then at that point, you're just like, there's nothing more to lose. I'm just existing, no longer living. And so eventually, when they find their way to the US, most of them, when I ask them, well, so when was the happiest day of your life? They're going to tell you, oh, the day I heard we were coming to the United States. Yeah. And so majority of them, were able to come in here to fully settle as refugees with refugee status here. So getting here, if they are not properly managed as agents, letting them realize that at this point in time, this is your new home. You need to settle down, acclimatize, and, start making a meaning out of your life. So that's where my own framework came in. So I designed a framework using logotherapy and appreciative inquiry. So logotherapy is just more about a sense of meaning, having a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose to life. While appreciative inquiry is like, okay, we need to appreciate the good, even in the midst of all the chaos and evil that has happened, there's still something good about it. So then we're trying to make a sense of meaning, from the things that have happened to us in a good way. So my own framework sort of try to help them, realize their agency and the opportunity for them to restart a new life and begin to have a positive vision for the future.
That's so powerful, Priscilla. I mean, I just think we have our way of talking about refugees and migrants in the United States, and then hearing about the process and trials and challenges that refugees go through internationally, especially in African countries, to go to Europe and go to the US is just so, it's extensive. It's consuming. It's wow. I can't imagine what it feels like for you to have to almost absorb all of what they've been through just to even help them go through it. How do you balance? Because there is a such thing as secondary traumatic stress syndrome. Or is that what it's called?
Yeah.
So it's like the helpers, when they're trying to help, they ended up getting affected as well. How do you balance that with all that you're seeing and hearing?
So for me, this is more than a research. My heart is fully in it. So this is like more than work for me, and I'm fully invested in it. I'm passionate about it. And so I can like safely just talk them through it and then get to a point where they begin to like self-reflect and resolve, the unspoken pains in their heart by themselves. They begin to sort of console themselves. And as they do that, it also has impact on me because their stories of transformation, I would say, is really what keeps me going. Because, for example, there was a woman, a lady, she in her early 40s. So when I was having the interview with her, and it got to, because they're meant to do like some dream exercises of, okay, so what do you want to do with your life? Okay, before this happened, what were you on track to do with your life? What did you see yourself doing? Okay, after that happened, have you been able to, still pursue, or you forgot about it? Okay, right now in the present, what do you want to do? Is it still that one, or you have a new, part you want to take? And then, okay, so I was asking Anna, okay, so can you dream of your envision, like your best future? Like, can you have an idea? Just dream about it, think about it, and tell me about it, or write it down, or draw it. And then she told me, oh, that's so difficult for her that she has stopped dreaming because every time she dreams, it's always something negative that's going to happen rather than the dream coming true. So that was like a really, really painful, time for me to, but we kept on discussing actually. So how would there be, we believe many times hope keeps us going in this world. Hope that,
Yeah.
something's good is on the way, something's going to be good, it's going to get better. But then here's someone that's telling you, like, I've lost hope because saying I no longer dream to me means no more hope. So at that point, I was like, my God. But eventually, as we kept on talking and discussed, okay, so what are your passion? What do you enjoy doing? So I took them back to self-discovery because it's only when you're able to rediscover yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, the things you love to do. From there, you'll be able to, bring out what dreams of the future, what kind of future you want. I haven't been able to establish what your strengths are. So that was how I was able to maneuver that conversation. And eventually, before we were done, she made a very, very beautiful plan about our dream future, told me the things she wanted to do and how she's going to achieve it. Because the process is, self-discovery, then you dream, then you design your future by yourself. Okay, so this is what I need to do. How do I get from point A to point G that I'm going? So point A, B, C, D, then they design their own long-term goals, short-term goals, mid-term goals, and all of those things. And sometimes put timelines and dates and all of those with it just to help them, get started, to self-start, and then let's see what happens. And she's doing really good now. She's planning to like go and start our master's program now.
Well, that's amazing.
She loves counseling. So she wants to go into counseling. And she said child psychology important because of the children that she saw that went through all of those things. So for me, those are my healing. That's my reward for doing the research. Like that's all I live for, to hear them say, oh, I was in like, but now because I've gone through this framework program with you, I feel a lot better. I feel I can achieve what I've not been able to achieve over the years. And so that's what keeps me going and helps me know that, there is purpose in their suffering. Once you find purpose in the suffering, then the suffering becomes little or easy because you've been able to attach it to a purpose. So,
right. And I think it's really interesting with your approach because I think what's really important is you help people separate the core of who they are from what they've been through,
yes.
And I think so often when we go through something, it becomes so deeply embedded to us that we attach ourselves to the external events, right? And it becomes so entangled that it's hard to see yourself clearly. And so it seems like your framework helps people see themselves clearly again, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. So, what have you learned from their stories that shifted your own understanding about conflict and resilience?
I've learned a lot from them. For me, now, I think with their own, I wouldn't just say definition of resilience, with their lifestyle, because they didn't have a choice but to be resilient, to, hope for the next day and the next day. And something I've learned from them now is that nothing can stop you from realizing your dreams except you yourself. And so at that point where you take responsibility for your future, irrespective of what has happened from the past, it's easy to put on the victim cap and then want to, which is justifiably so if you want to, but the way the framework is set up is in a way that you don't need to embrace that victim story, but you need to champion your story as an heroine, as a victor, as a survivor, not as the defeated. So once that mentality is corrected in their mindset, then they are already now, understanding the power in their own resilience. Like you did it, no one did it for you. No one lived through every day despite the pain they were going through. You did it. So beginning from there, if you made it this far, then you can go further, So nothing can stop you from realizing your dreams except you. That's my new understanding of what resilience is, especially for people that have, and I'll also say that resilience is the courage to move on and the grit to say, it doesn't matter what I've been through, I'm still going to be who and what I've always wanted to be. And that has really been this, especially the youths that are like the 18 to 25 category. Those ladies are doing so well. I'm so impressed with, all the stuff they're doing. So they just make you keep going. Like, if this ones can do this, like, we don't have excuse.
What excuse do I have?
No.
Wow, that's amazing. So I guess, you talked a little bit about their journey from country to country to eventually get to Europe or the US during their resettlement journey. And so, to your knowledge, from your experience and your research, what systemic or cultural barriers do they face in being seen as more than their status? It's almost like you wear the stamp of like refugee.
Uh-huh.
How does that impact their experience once they're like in the US or Europe?
So I would say for the people that are already here that I'm dealing with, I think to a large extent, many of them, I think they've sort of been able to live with that status as a refugee. They've sort of accepted it, but nonetheless, they're trying to, still be able to create the life that they want for themselves. However, to a large extent, some of them are doing well for themselves. They got, although the idea is that most of them still work minimum wage jobs like all their lives. So that's the challenge. And then that's really my pain for them because these are like underserved communities where, they just do minimum wage jobs all their lives because they do not see a reason to want to be more. Okay. So the research to a large extent is challenging them and encouraging them, you're more than your status. And to be able to combat this, you're more than a status mindset, you need to number one, remember who you are. Like that's where the self-discovery again comes in. And then a self-awareness, self-discovery, and then to a large extent also help them identify and celebrate their resilience because they don't know that they are that resilient. Because most times you just go through situations like a brief, you don't go back to replay it in your mind, the step by step process. Only then would you be able to, oh, I tried. I think I tried. So helping them go through that also makes them know I'm not just a refugee, I'm not just a victim, I'm not as weak as the society thinks I am, because right now I'm in a better position to rewrite my own story, whichever way I want to write it.
I love that. And it's so much there, like where do you to unpack all of that? But one thing you said that stuck out to me is from the outside, people can look at you and see what you've been through and see how resilient you are. But it's one thing to feel that within yourself. Sometimes it just never feels like anything's enough, or because you're experiencing everything internally and what every thought you have and every emotion that you're feeling, you assume everybody else knows how maybe insecure you're feeling or how down you're feeling. And we don't see it. So we just think you're strong and all these things. So I think it's really interesting to highlight the simple act of moving forward despite everything you've been through. That's the resilience. That's what it looks like, so you're doing it.
Yeah, you're still on
Yeah.
the grind.
Right, right. So how do like small acts of like education and storytelling and community building, how does that help them in their transformation process?
A lot, a lot, a lot. Because I think I'm still gonna do like I have that already though. I picked about 15 of their stories, telling in a story format. I'm still gonna incorporate some of those into my dissertation. Yeah. My my chair particularly is interested in like, okay, Priscilla, you have all of these wonderful stories. So put them, somewhere in between if it's a chapter or something. But before I was able to get their stories, I also myself had to, be vulnerable, share my own story, share my own life. And at that point, I saw them ease up and, oh, wow. And then everybody just started sharing because we had like the one-on-one interview at the beginning, then in between focus group discussions in groups. And so I had to like build like a general momentum first and foremost before then splitting them up into focus group discussions, give them the open space to like, be vulnerable. And then everyone started. And one way that I saw that I also helped them in like writing their goals, especially the 18 to 25-year-old girls, when they hear what others are saying, they're forced to also think because, the human brain can be really, really sneaky on us. It doesn't want to work. It doesn't want to, be put to stress. But when you see someone beside you doing it, then you're like, okay, that means it's not that bad. So before you know it, they were coming up with like real dreams. Like even they were surprised that they could come up with something that beautiful, like very intelligent ideas that they were coming up, and many of them are really talented. Many of them braid hair like not, they're like expert braiders, young ladies. They're like makeup artists already. So there are a lot of them now on my list for they need help going to like cosmetology school, beautician, esthetician, all the sort of there are a good number of them that are, thinking of that. I'm even now thinking of how to maybe have like a refugee salon where, they braid hair somewhere in Atlanta and all so that they all can take turns and shift to be there and that way generate income for themselves and still be living in their dreams. So I would get some of them to even like get jobs in like braiding salons and, they're so excited about it. Yeah, so storytelling helps in unveiling vulnerability, when you incorporate that in the way you, talk to them and they hear from each other. They are also encouraged by stories among themselves and then they continue chatting
It's a cycle,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So we've been talking a lot about the resiliency and again, the transformation process. So when we think about healing, what does healing look like in contexts where conflict is not over but ongoing? So like some of the stuff you talked about going on in Nigeria and Sudan, these conflicts haven't ended, So while the refugees are no longer there, I'm pretty sure they still have families and ties and all types of things that are keeping them attached to these places. So, how do they heal in that process when the conflict is technically not over?
So for that, when you get to that point in the interview, there was mostly on the one-on-one interview, the many of them get sad again, like, I really wish I get to go back home. And another will tell me, I'm still gonna go back home to build my own clinic sometime in the future. So even though the news from Sudan is really, really, South Sudan specifically is not nice, in recent times, it's really, really bad. So they're worried about it. They are, concerned. And most of them are like trying to see if they could still bring in more people, at least to rescue them from the face of the conflict. And they're also worried about the family members they will never, ever see again. So that, to a large extent, I would say, hinders their healing, like because this research is majorly focused on the healing of the mind, beyond the socioeconomic frameworks that has always been the go-to in situations like this. All of the nonprofits that we have these days, they just try to help them get set up. Okay, just get a minimum wage job and keep going. And that's it. But for most of them, no, that's not it. They are not. The fact that they are working a minimum wage job, paying their bills, does not equal to fully settled down, like getting fully settled down in the system. There's still a lot more involved. So, but that's why I'm coming from a logotherapy point of view, and you being able to find purpose in your suffering, and through it still be able to make something out of it. So once you find that purpose in suffering, you're able to find yourself. It helps you find yourself. And once you find yourself, then healing becomes easier.
Mm.
That's right.
No, it's great. It's great. So what does resilience mean to you now after all the research and interviews and personal reflections and advocacy work? What does it mean to you today?
Okay, I think that was what I was sharing earlier, that nothing can stop you from realizing your dreams except you, in terms of the stage of resilience that you're at now. And that irrespective, resilience is the courage for them to move on, irrespective of, whatever you have been through. Because as humans, we have the ability to want to self-pity and just be like, okay, I deserve more chocolate, I deserve more ice cream, I went through that. But then looking at yourself, you're like, really? Okay, I need to, put in my best and, for the life I want. So they have really tried, even without knowing, because resilience for them is just like every day. They hear news of, death of loved ones like all the time, looking at their day-to-day living, Nashe, their day-to-day life. For example, they have issues with their children, with child raising, because the way they would traditionally raise children in the global south is not the way they're being raised here. So some of the mothers was telling me, like, they tell you, I'm now 18, I can sleep out, I can come in anytime. You can't hit me. And she's like, so worried about them. Like, no, like if they were at home, there are several other ways she would have been able to raise them. But because they're in the American society, there's really nothing that she can do about it. So them, coming to terms with, child discipline, child raising, and several other things in between. But back to the question you asked me before on community. So community, to a large extent, has helped them, model like a sub community within the Western community. Because I got to Clarkston through like their church, the Clarkston International Bible Church. Yeah. So they have like refugees from all over. They have like 6 churches in one, speaking different languages. So it was the South Sudanese church I really focused on. So that helps them build community. It makes them feel like they are in Sudan, even in the US. And so their children also are able to learn from the culture. They are still speaking this language. They're still speaking
Yeah.
their language, rather, in church. And that was a challenge. That also poses like challenge for those of them that just came in. Because if you're not speaking, the way to understand English is by speaking it. And if you're not speaking it, there's no way you're going to learn it. I had to tell some of them, like, you're always in the South Sudanese community, but you need to learn to speak English. You're home speaking English with your parents and siblings. You are in church speaking, so it's also a challenge, but to a large extent, I would say the communal living, the communal life has really, really helped them in, forming both communal resilience and even individual resilience in the face of adversity, in the face of conflict, to a large extent. Another thing I need to talk about is the language. This is also, I'm talking about like ongoing challenges that they have on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of them, despite all that the refugee nonprofit organizations taking care of the refugees and all are doing in terms of language, I was really, really surprised that there are people who have been here for over 20 years, they still can communicate in English language. So they still can have basic communication in English language. I had to interview a woman who she had to close down a braiding salon because of the language barrier, because the clients are going to come in, okay, I want to do to my hair. She won't understand what they want. And so if you do what I don't want to my hair, I'm never going to come back again. So as a result of that, our business folded up. So these are the kind of challenges they keep having, on a daily basis, but they still keep pushing our edge in resilience and trying to see how they can still maneuver these challenges that they have just to survive and, do the best they can be. So for the younger ones, they can use the language translation apps, and also they've it's been really helpful for them. But for the older ones that have been here 20, 15 years, they still can. So we still need to help them in those areas.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that. That's extremely important. And I imagine it's just hard to find the balance again of assimilating to a new culture, but still wanting to value your traditions from, your homeland as well. That's an ongoing challenge in a multicultural nation, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, this conversation has been so insightful, and obviously I can talk to you for hours about this. There's so many follow-up questions and directions we could have taken this, but we don't want to take the listeners' entire evening.
Yeah, that's right.
But so before I let you go, where can the listeners learn more about your work and support your initiatives that you're involved in?
So this work I'm doing is now developed into a nonprofit, which is called Self-Actualization for Refugee Women. So our website is on SA for four as in figure four, SA for refugeewomen.com. So you can find out more, about what we do, and the email is there, or you can email me personally at Adebayo, Priscilla Adebayo@gmail.com. So I don't know if you're able to scroll it on the screen later on so that it will.
Yeah, I'll put it in the description for people to reach out to you. And are you on LinkedIn, Instagram, anywhere else?
Yeah, we're on LinkedIn majorly. Yeah, for all of us.
Awesome. Okay, we'll be sure to leave those links and emails in your bio for this episode. Well, I want to thank you again so much. This conversation and your work brought something deeply powerful into focus. That resilience is not a response, it's a reclamation. So refugee women carry not just loss, but legacy, and preserving their stories isn't just about remembering the past, it's about protecting their voice, power, and dignity. Conflict transformation in this context isn't abstract, it's embodied, it's cultural, and it's deeply human. Thank you for joining me in the Resolution Room. If today's conversation gave you something to think about, please consider sharing it with someone else who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show. It really helps more people find these conversations. You can explore our wearable wisdom collection at the Mind Shop, or visit lowinsights.com to learn more about our work and upcoming projects. All of the details are in the show notes below. And until next time, keep building in the quiet, because that's what will carry you forward.